Quick quiz to start with then. The judiciary are one of the three main strands of power within the UK. What are the other two? And you should have got the answer of the executive and the legislature. So what we're going to look at today then is what actually is the judiciary. Look at the role and the powers. The role means what job do they do, so what functions do they have, and then the powers, what are they actually able to do. So, magistrates, if you look on the government website on gov.uk at magistrates, you will see that magistrates are used in magistrates court. So the lesser criminal crimes, the vast amount of them, 95% of criminal cases are only heard at a magistrates court because the vast amount of crime is low level. There are 3 magistrates in a magistrates court and they are volunteers. Most of the time they are people who have had experience in kind of social roles, so things like retired police officers, retired teachers, retired social workers, but literally anybody pretty much can do it. You can do it if you yourself have done a minor crime but not anything major, or a series of minor crimes. You can do it if you are under 70 and it's usually done over about 13 or 14 days per year. You get 21 hours training for it, and then you are literally qualified to be able to put people into prison for up to 6 months. So magistrates can give people a £5,000 fine or 6 months in prison or up to 12 months if it's a repeat offence. They do have legal guidance, so there are people there who give them guidance, but they are not legally qualified, so they don't have to have gone to university and studied law. They don't have to be trained barristers or anything like that. It's just 21 hours training. So think about reasons why that's good and bad. Press pause and have a go at making 2 points for and 2 points against. In points 4, you might have thought about things like democracy, the fact that everyday citizens can be part of the legal justice system. It's a really important part of our democracy. The fact that they've got common sense understanding. On the negative points, you might think about the fact that they've only had 3 days training and then they can put people in prison. The fact that they might have their own biases as well. Okay, so our judiciary, we know all of this. This is just a recap of the type of courts in this country. So we have got on the criminal side, magistrates court deal with 95% of all cases. We've got the fact that then goes up to the Crown Court if it's something more serious that deserves a harsher punishment, and that's where you get your judge and your jury. You then go up to the High Court if it needs to from the magistrates. Court of Appeal is where you would go if you disagree with the decision, and then the highest court in the country is the UK Supreme Court. On the civil side, we've got tribunals, where you might go, for example, if you disagree with a child being permanently excluded from school, or if you feel like you've been sacked unfairly from work. County courts are where the majority of civil litigation is held. It can go up to the High Court if it's more serious than that. And again, that can go to Court of Appeal, and then the highest one will be the UK Supreme Court. So how judges are appointed. In this country, it's on something called the Judicial Appointments Commission, and basically that's an independent organisation that selects candidates for office as a judge in England and Wales, and you have to get there through merit. So you apply to become a judge. Usually you will have been a barrister, been very successful, and you apply and you get your position on merit, so if you've been good at that job. There's lots of different roles, so lots of different jobs of judges dispensing justice, so they have to make sure the law's applied equally and fairly. They've got to interpret the law. Sometimes they have to create case law, so that's something called common law, where judges have to make the law as they go along and then they'll declare it. They might be involved in judicial reviews. So if you believe that a citizen feels that some government organisation or local government has gone against their human rights or has wronged them, then they can ask for a judicial review where judges will independently review the actions of the government. They also hold public inquiries into widespread public concern. Sometimes that we don't need to worry too much about the EU one, and also they have to decide on sentencing. Okay, so if we have a look at this then, judges have to be neutral. They've got to have no political sympathies and they must avoid all prejudices and unconscious biases to remain legal considerations. They have political restrictions. They must not engage in open political activities and they are not allowed to support pressure groups. They have to have legal training and the legal training is tough. It's years at university. They are held accountable, so if their rulings can be questioned and can be held accountable through the appeal system, and they do not take part in public debates. They have to have practised as a solicitor or barrister for at least 5 years. They have to pass specific exams to show they've got knowledge in certain legal areas. You will then shadow a current judge and they will assess whether they believe you are ready for a position in the as a judge. The Judicial Appointments Commission and an independent body will decide whether you can be a judge or not, and there's a range of different judges that you go through. The Constitutional Reform Act of 2005 set out the responsibilities of the Lord Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary of England and Wales and the President of Courts in England and Wales. The only problems that we can argue within the judiciary then is possibly a conservative bias. Judges are mainly white, male, upper class, have gone to public school and usually Oxbridge. There are issues with less judges being from who are female and from ethnic minority background. So, judges. The most senior judges are the 12 members of the Supreme Court. That's kind of like the Premier League of judges. That's where you want to get to. Gender and social exclusivity has been a concern, like we've already mentioned, and there can be inbuilt bias. Most judges are male, most judges are white, and most judges went to a very posh school, so it could be argued that they've got a very narrow view of everyday situations and may have their own biases. It could be argued that they are out of touch with society. The salary is good, although the attraction to becoming a judge is also to do with the social position and the high level of professionalism. So if we have a look at the background of judges, this is out of date now, but it's not too much different. 3/4 of judges are male. The vast amount of judges are white. And the vast amount of judges are over 50 years old. So there is that argument that they are out of touch and do not represent society. So what are the roles of judges then? They've got to interpret the meaning of law. They have got to keep up with the separation of powers, so they cannot be the same people who make the laws, preside over court proceedings. In some cases, they actually have to make the laws, and they've got to protect citizens from an overpowering state. So a judge is like an umpire in court. In the courtroom, they are there to ensure a fair trial. They've got specialist knowledge and they're the ones who chair it. They interpret and apply the law, so they should apply the letter of the law. However, sometimes they have to make their own law. So that means that some laws are what's called common law, where judges make them. They also chair public inquiries and commissions because they're independent from the government. So the Macpherson inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence, the Hutton inquiry into the suicide of David Kelly, and so on are led by judges. They've got to protect citizens from an overpowering state, and that's a really important role of a judiciary. They can also call the government to account in things like judicial reviews, and that can decide whether a department or a minister has acted beyond their powers. So if we look at the upper levels of the judiciary then, we've got lower courts go to High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court is the highest court in this country. However, the European courts do supersede that. So we've got the European Court of Human Rights and the European Court of Justice. So with sentencing powers, we need to be aware of aggravating circumstances, things that make the case worse. So if the people were in when they burgled up a house, if they used a weapon to attack somebody, all of those things make it worse. Mitigating circumstances might make it slightly better. So it could be perhaps you have got mental illnesses, perhaps something horrible has happened in your life that's made you act the way you do. They also have to think about how they're going to punish the offender, how are they going to help reduce crime, will it act as a deterrent, reform and rehabilitation of the offender, the protection of the public, and the person who's done the offence perhaps making some form of reparation. Okay, if we compare how our judges are compared to America then, if you watch a clip of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you'll see that Uncle Phil wants to carry on being a judge and he has to get voted in. In this country, we do not vote our judges in. They are completely neutral from that. If we look at this source then, it says the selection of state court judges in the USA, there's 3 ways that they can be appointed. The first one is by appointment, and this means that the state's governor or legislator chooses the judges. Our legislator is the whole of Parliament. Parliament does not choose our judges. Their second method is merit selection, so judges are chosen by a legislative committee based on each potential judge's past performance. Some states hold retention elections to determine if the judge should continue to serve. And then the last way is through partisan elections, which means judges are selected through partisan elections, are voted in by the electorate and often run as part of the political party's slate of candidates. Your question says, consider how the appointment systems described in source G differ from the concepts and principles that relate to the judiciary in the UK. Well, we've got a couple of big problems here, haven't we? In America, the judges might be chosen by the legislator or they are voted in. That's completely different to the way our judges are chosen. Our judges, our judiciary, through our separation of powers, which is our concepts and principles that relate to the judiciary, means that they cannot be linked to a political party. There can't be anything to do with the legislator. There can't be anything to do with the executive. So all of that goes against our separation of powers. They are certainly not elected in because they are not to do with that whole process of choosing an executive, and our legislature, our whole of Parliament, does not choose our judges. Our judges are independently selected through the Judicial Appointments Commission based on merit. So for that 4-mark question, any 2 points from there, thoroughly explained.